Coming up, what an excellent day for Eileen Dietz. Well, howdy folks, and welcome to Minute 33 of the Exorcist Minute, a show where we endeavor to examine, extrapolate, and excavate The Exorcist, minute by terrifying minute. My name is Lester Ryan Clark.
And I'm Keenan Dietz.
And we'll be your holy guides on this journey through what some have called the scariest movie of all time. Okay, so our minute begins with Father Nicola staring in horror at the desecrated statue of the Virgin Mary.
And it ends with Dr. Klein saying, "Do you feel anything?"
But let's get back to this weird desecration here. I like the acting by Father Nicola here. Again, not a professional actor, and he most likely isn't even seeing the thing that we cut to in just a second, but he has this look of shock that's also mixed with hurt and sadness, and it's really touching. You think it'd be this look of outrage, like, who did this to church property? But it's almost like he's looking at Mary, not the statue, and being like, oh my God, who did this to you?
Yeah, it's actually very touching when you look at it 3 or 4 times in a row like we do when we watch this, yes.
Which, I guess is the whole point of the desecration, right? That's why it's a desecration and not just a defacing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think this look of hurt, coupled with the shocking image we get immediately after, does enough so that even if you're not religious, you get this feeling of like, this is wrong. And again, folks, let's remember when this movie was made. If we feel that now, imagine how audiences in theaters felt, living as they did in a much more religious time. Even if you weren't religious in that time, I feel like this would hit even harder back then. Like an atheist watching in 1973 would be like, oh, that's too far. That makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah. Did you watch the show Highlander when you were a kid?
I didn't
the
know.
TV show. Oh, you would have actually, I bet, loved that show.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. Like every week, because the Highlander, he goes into different time. It's told non-chronologically.
Okay.
So it's sort of like, he has flashbacks and he goes and he's fighting in Japan and he's fighting in North Africa and all his different lives. The Highlander lives forever and they can only be killed by other Highlanders.
Right.
Well, anyways, I distinctly remember this shot when I was a kid watching it at my friend's house. So it must have been in like 1993 or something like that. And watching a character on the show who was like a bad guy. Uh-huh. And he takes a Bible and he throws it in the fireplace and he watches it burn. And I am still shocked by that. I'm like, but what it made me think of then, even as a kid, before I thought about making movies or writing movies or anything, I thought, well, what does the actor think about that as he's throwing this Bible in? And this is that, I guess this is like that ship of, what's that ship? Oh goodness. I should think about these things.
The ship of Theseus?
Yes, exactly. I don't want to missay it. I'd rather not say the ship of Theseus, right? Like, so if you're an actor and you have a prop, right? I would say, I don't want to throw a real Bible in the fire, right? But they would say, okay, we've made it look as much like a Bible as possible. It has the cover that says Holy Bible in it.
Right.
And it has the gold leafing or whatever. At what point do you feel comfortable enough to throw it in the fire? It's still Bible-ish.
Yeah, that's a good question. And like with the Bible, it might be like a little bit easier because you could be like, the cover is the Bible, but inside is like, I don't know, Catch-22 by Joseph Heller or something like that,
So, yeah, take that.
Or we should think of a book that we don't like, because I really like Catch.
I don't know, Mein Kampf or something.
Right?
But if you've wrapped Mein Kampf in the Bible,
oh no, now already we're even before we throw it into the fire,
right.
it's making us feel bad.
Yeah. But that's that ship of Theseus idea, right? That's what it was, right? Where it's you have this ship that lasts long enough that you have to start replacing it. So you replace the sails, and then you replace the mast, and over decades you replace the boards, and at some point you've replaced every single item on the ship of Theseus. So
right.
So is it still the ship of Theseus if there's literally no atoms in it that were the original?
Correct. Yes.
So what makes the Bible the Bible? Well, I mean, I would still feel uncomfortable throwing. I might even have to say, like, and I'm an atheist, like, as I've said several times on the show, right? But at the time, I was thinking about that as a kid. Like, I don't know if I would do it. I think I'd make some stand-in, like, get a stunt Bible fire thrower in for me who would actually toss the thing in the fire. That makes me so uncomfortable.
Right, but even then, you'd be like. I don't know, like passively participating in somebody else throwing a Bible into the fire.
You did nothing. You let it happen.
don't know. Yeah. Like where do you draw the line? Yeah. And oh God, thank you for bringing the ship of Theseus into this. That made my little nerd heart sing. I talk about because we're talking about that in school, and I mentioned to my students, and it's like, well, like isn't there like what's the time frame for like all of the cells in your body to be like completely replaced? Isn't it like 7 years or something like that?
That makes sense, I guess. Yeah, but you're right. At some point, you're completely new cells, right?
Right. You have everything is completely new. Then are you the same person? It's like, well, I mean, you could argue like metaphorically, no, you're not. You've have 7 years of life, new experiences and all that. But yeah, it's weird. Like, when you're doing stuff that like you as the person, as the actor would be maybe like against doing, but like your character is going to do this thing. Like me, I'm against murder. Right.
Right. But you have no compunctions against playing a murderer, I would imagine.
No. I would play a murderer and I would pretend, stab somebody or pretend shoot somebody. And I would know this ship of Theseus is removed enough to where I can be like, no, this is not the same thing. This is
whatever that line is, you're comfortable.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. And it's like, actually, it's interesting we got to this because a little bit later on, we're going to see Linda Blair doing and saying some really, really shocking things. And like, I remember, I think it was Dick Smith, her makeup artist, the makeup artist of the, of the whole thing, saying, asking Linda, it's like, Linda, how do you feel about saying all of those things? And her genuinely answering, it was like, well, it's not me, it's Reagan. And it's like, so like, somehow she was able to draw the line of like, I can say all of these things. And she, I believe she is or was a Christian, like at, during the filming, the shooting of this. But she was able to draw that line. She's like, this is Reagan saying all of those things. This is not me.
Sorry, I got really quiet while you were talking about that because I was still thinking about this thought experiment about when you are no longer yourself.
Oh no, it's a fascinating experiment
because like where your consciousness is not in your cells,
right?
Or your consciousness and your soul, if you believe in a soul, are not in your cells. So if the cells are being replaced, then yeah, where is the consciousness stored?
It's weird, right? Because you could like even the cells of your brain are being replaced, are being renewed. Right. So where is that? Yeah, where is that you? Like Keenan, I know that you are the same Keenan that I met, all those years ago.
Yeah, in college, right?
Yeah, so like what's up? Like
Yeah, but there are no molecules in me that are the same. They've been reconfigured in some crazy way. There might be water molecules in me that are the same water molecules that have come back to me, right? But that's not where my soul is. My soul is not the water in my various bladders.
Right. Oh my God, we're getting into
sorry, but I was listening to everything you were saying about Linda Blair, but I was trying to think at the same time about this thought experiment. So I apologize.
No, it's okay. And we're gonna get into that anyway. I only talked about stuff that we're gonna talk about again later on. Right?
Yes, I wonder about the art director and the set dresser who have to build this Mary statue and do these terrible things to it. Because even if you build it from, say, you don't go to the church and take their Mary statue.
Yeah, this is
do this to that.
We want to hope that Friedkin. We want to hope again, but now, oh God, now that I'm thinking about it, Keenan, we want to hope that Friedkin is not so much of a monster that he would be like, "Hey, can we use this actual Mary statue?"
Or Blatty went to his college and went to a chapel that he knew. I mean, as the producer, he was like, "I went to Dahlgren Chapel, where a chapel that I knew on the campus of Georgetown." I mean, so yeah, a couple things here. So yeah, right. They're not taking the Mary statue and that's there and doing this. They're creating their own Mary statue. But
it's gotta be. If
you build your own Mary statue because you're trying to be, nice and reverent to the location,
right?
It's still a statue of the Virgin Mary, right?
Right. This is another level of like this is even more complicated than the Bible because you can make a cover of the Bible and fill it with another book or something like that, or just blank pages, and then throw that in the fire. But this is a statue of the Virgin Mary is a statue of the Virgin Mary, no matter like if you made it like today or yesterday or 7 years ago, like it's a statue of the Virgin Mary.
Yeah, any depiction, right? So I mean, if I drew a picture of Mary while I'm here, I'm in my office at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. Don't sue me for doing whatever. But I'm going to draw a picture of the Virgin Mary that you can't see and no one else will see, and it's stick figure ish, right?
Wait, are you doing this right now?
Yeah, I'm doing it right now.
Oh my goodness.
And now, even if I were to show this to you and you wouldn't know as the Virgin Mary unless I said it was, it's still, I've still drawn a picture of the Virgin Mary, right?
Right.
So it deserves some kind of reverence or at least respect, right?
Yes.
So then, so anything you imbue with the idea that it is this saint, or not just a saint, but like in Catholicism, like one of the main saints, right?
Yeah, well, the Virgin Mary, like she
right, exactly.
Madonna, yeah,
the Madonna, yeah. And we'll talk. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about like Mary's place within Catholicism specifically later on.
Yeah.
But yeah, like this is her. And so if I were to say this is my Virgin Mary, and someone were to come in and do something to it, spit on it, or rip it up, on knowing it, it's still very disrespectful.
Right.
Even if you came in and ripped this up without knowing it's the Virgin Mary, that's one thing. But if I say this is my picture of the Virgin and you messed it up, even that's icky.
Yeah.
So here we are building a 3-dimensional version to look like the real one that's in the previous shot,
and it's very authentic. Yeah.
Oy. I don't know if I could do it, even as someone who doesn't have faith, as I've said.
No, and I think I think this is. I wonder if we look at the history of how demons and demonic activity is depicted in film to like scare you, is The Exorcist the first where it's like focuses less on like, I don't know, shooting fire at you and attacking you, and more on like desecrations and being like blasphemous in this way?
Well, I would love to hear otherwise. I can't think of at least a Hollywood movie that does this. I mean, there's a little bit in Italian cinema in the 1960s, maybe not desecration in like Fellini films, but certainly a playful attitude towards crucifixes and statues of saints, but not quite like this. Like the opening of La Dolce Vita is a shot of a statue of Christ. But then you realize that it is flying above the city of Rome, and you're like, oh, what's this? And then you realize it is attached to a helicopter, and then you realize that they are installing it on top of a podium, which is the only way to do this. And you're like, oh, what a weird, funny, it is funny and it is unusual, but it's not exactly maybe irreverent. It is irreverent, but not. I don't know what would be the next step past irreverent.
I mean, it's addressing like a logistical, real world, like, hey, we got to get this statue up here somehow, right?
Isn't this is kind of silly what we have to do in order to practice our faith,
right?
Or maybe not our faith, but their faith. It is making fun a little bit, but it's not like saying like we're not drawing terrible things on them like we are here.
It's like it's mixing the like mundanity of like human like things like we have to logistically get this like statue up here, and it's like isn't it funny that like this like humdrum like human thing also just involves a very holy image.
Right, yeah.
But then like this is purposely intended to shock us.
Yeah, I can't think of an earlier instance of this. And as you say a little bit, right? Like now it's kind of tropey. This kind of thing happens
this is what devils do.
Right.
Like, yeah. And I wonder if before it's like, oh, you got to see The Exorcist. Like the demon is so scary. Oh, what does he do? Does he like shoot fire at you? Does he claw your eyes out? No, he desecrates an image of the Virgin Mary. And even back then we'd be like, oh, geez.
Yeah.
Like, whoa.
There's some really good pieces about Independence Day, the disaster movie from the 90s that we grew up with. You've seen Independence Day.
Yes.
Okay. I mean, most people my age saw it many times. And just about how, and now I get older, I'm like, oh, this isn't very good. but like the idea of these monuments.
That's the one where Will Smith punches someone, right?
Yes, it is. He punches an alien. That's absolutely correct. He says, "Welcome to Earth." but like the idea of seeing the Statue of Liberty blowing up and the White House blowing up, you know, and even though it's later on near the end when the humans have won, seeing this giant ship crashed amongst the pyramids, you know, there's a reason why these landmarks, seeing them destroyed is so, in that case, kind of fun. But the fun is like from being shocked at this, right? These things that we measure our lives about, and seeing them destroyed.
Yeah, look at these great like kind of markers in the sand of like what we think humanity is. Oh, the White House. Oh, the pyramids. Oh, this and yeah.
Yeah, and I thought that was going to go away after 9/11, like that funness of that, and it did for a little while, right? Because then you see an actual set of landmarks being literally destroyed, and it is not fun at all. So I
and
thought
associated
that would be,
with like tragedy and lots of people dying.
yeah, but it was not that long afterwards that the team behind Independence Day just made movies like that again. It was a little bit different, where they made The Day After Tomorrow, and you saw these landmarks freezing, but now there's landmarks blowing up, and then in the sequel to Independence Day, they rebuild most of the landmarks just in time for the aliens to come back down and destroy them all again.
I wonder if like on the other side of that, like we're still doing the same thing. We're blowing up all these landmarks and everything like that. But it's almost like a like pre 9/11, it would be like oh my God,
unimaginable, right? Yeah.
But then after it, we'd be maybe almost like therapeutic. Or
that's probably a good way of putting it. Yeah. That's probably the answer to that.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, not fun for me, but yeah, why is it fun for everybody else? It seems, where we're still doing this. Yeah, therapeutic. That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah, or cathartic, or whatever you want to call it. Yeah, I'm sure. Like our psychiatrist in residence, Father Karras, would be able to tell us a little bit more about that.
Right.
Or we would just be on the other side of the couch, and he'd be like, "You guys are fucked up."
Right. So as for what we can tell for now, the earliest instance in a movie of this desecration happening to the statue of a saint, and not just a saint,
and to show us that demons are they're bad news,
right?
In case you hadn't figured that
out. Right. So here's that.
There's that. And to that point, folks, it's actually worse in the book and the screenplay. It says there in those places that the statue had been painted, quote, like a harlot, and with a clay erect phallus also glued on there. So a much less gory and much more sexual desecration, which both images are bad, right? But I feel like that one would have been even worse to Catholics and Christians back then. Like, I almost wonder if the studio stepped in here and said, you guys gotta like monstrify this up a bit. Like, you can't sexualize the Virgin Mary. That's too far. Like, they'll shut us down. So make it like gory and not anatomically resembling anything, right? Like these almost look like thorns or spikes, right? Nothing human.
Yeah, I guess we can kind of describe this for people who aren't watching the movie along with us, who are doing it from memory. But there are two thorns or spikes coming out of the Virgin's breasts, and they're black and painted black, and then the ends are red, and so it's bright red. So you could say that they're breasts, but they don't necessarily look like that.
They don't look like any human breasts that ever existed.
Right? Yes. So I mean, I don't get necessarily a sexual connection there, and then not in her crotch, but something coming out of her belly more is this thing that you could say is trying to recapture Blatty's description of a phallus, but it's not. It looks like a thorn. It looks like a spider's fang or something like that, or a rose thorn.
Yeah. Like, I mean, almost like a tail or something like that. It's conical.
I have never thought of it as a phallus, as much as I've seen this movie until I read that in the screenplay here, that Blatty's idea is a sculpted clay phallus.
Yeah. It almost looks like, I don't know, like you know how you have statues that have been like overtaken by like trees, mm-hmm. or like vegetation kind of like grows around them and sometimes like through them, you mm-hmm. know? So it almost looks like that. It looks like tree roots or something like that. Like something not human, monstrous in that way.
Right. And this phallus one, or this thorn that's coming out of her, it's more out of her belly button than her crotch, right? Her navel. It's come out with some red blood colored paint, but the thorn itself is black.
Right. Yeah. Which is just so weird to think about, like, and that's what okay. So Keenan, what do you think? Do you think the studio kind of like stepped in and said, let's make this violent and gross and monstrous rather than sexual? Like,
I'm not sure, because so much of the movie is also sexual later. So I'm not exactly sure who is changing Blatty's mind here. I wasn't able to find anything where Blatty had disagreed with this on the record. So he seems to have whatever precipitated this change, he seems to have accepted it at the very least. For instance, there isn't like another statue that they filmed and put into the Virgin you've never seen.
Right. Did you do that on purpose?
Yes.
Okay. But like, yeah, because I'm just trying to, like, I'm thinking, okay, what could have been, what might have been, like if they had done exactly as Blatty said, and made her. I don't know how you would even do that on a statue, like put anatomically correct uh, private parts
Right.
on.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what Blatty means when to paint it over to suggest that the Virgin is a harlot.
Yeah, that's also a very vague description, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that could mean anything. But I feel like this was whoever made this choice. I feel like it was a choice of like, let's make it more monstrous and less sexual,
Mm-hmm.
which is like so weird to think about that this version is the one that they went for because like because it was less shocking
Mm-hmm.
and isn't that a thing like American censorship versus European censorship? Isn't it like swapped around to where like over there or like over here, sex is a big or was a big cultural taboo and it was heavily censored in movies and shows to the point where like you'd have married couples sleeping in separate beds. But
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
yeah. But then ironically, we get this green light with violence. So guns and blood and killing and whatnot, is okay.
Yeah, in America where violence is censored differently. So let's say at the beginning, it's not necessarily like the censors who were coming up with the production code in the 1920s. They're not necessarily saying one is better than the other. It's not like weighted. But the solutions for violence is to include less blood. For instance, it favors gun violence over violence through strangling or violence through knives.
Interesting.
So the result is potentially of cleaner violence, right? So you see compared to like in like it's a thought experiment again. Like imagine that if American films had become equally weighted towards like violence by knife and strangulation, as opposed to where most of our murders in movies are by gun and they are clean and they don't have blood and we don't see bullet wounds in people.
Right. Yeah.
That makes gun violence seem easy, like not as big of a deal. So, you could have a gangster film where 40 people get killed in the 1930s by guns, and it could still be a very fun movie and not feel like, I mean, imagine the same thing if it's like 40 people being strangled to death or or being blown up. So people have argued that the direction that American censorship went makes gun violence seem like it's not as big of a deal in America, which seems to be borne out. Right. There's many studies about that you can look at over the years about the way that media portrays it, because one of the things that censors eventually instituted was the idea for a while that if you had a character being shot, you couldn't say if I'm shooting your character, it wouldn't be a two shot of me firing the gun and you falling from being shot in the same shot. They would be separate shots. So that just by its nature means that they're more mediated. They are more removed from each other. So I fire a gun in a shot of me and then you fall down in a shot of you. And it's almost like it's a slightly less that I had something to do with you falling down.
Right. Interesting. Huh. And I mean, so that's the whole bag on violence. And I don't know, you might have to correct me about this, but like in my notes, I'm kind of also reflecting on like over in Europe, they're like a little bit less uptight about sexuality in films, and it's the sexuality that is less censored and the violence that is more censored.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Yeah, so sexuality has been a stopping point in a lot of films. Even
in the
US, right? So censorship in the early days, again, it's not weighted as more important, but there are very particular rules. There are a lot more specific rules about what's wrong in sexuality to be censored in American films, like the length of a kiss. So the length of a kiss is some number of seconds or shorter. If you have two people who are on a bed together, they each have to have 1 foot touching the ground. Things like that. And then there were some, at least in the movies, that I'm not quite sure about in television. In the movies, some things come out of that are just natural, but they're not like actually they're not actually declaimed in the rules. So the idea of married couples sleeping in separate twin beds,
right,
with the nightstand in between, room for Jesus in between them, like even though they're literally married and they have children
and they have kids. It's like how did you get those kids?
Yeah, that's not in the production code, which was the rules that governed Hollywood censorship. And again, this wasn't like the government doing this. This was the studios colluding for a set of common standards. So it wasn't the law. And then in the rules within this, it didn't say that couples had to sleep in 2 separate beds, but that became the norm.
Interesting.
Yeah. And there were rules that adultery was not to be tolerated. So if you had an adulterer, the result was that that you had to get back with your husband or wife, or they would often resolve that by killing the adulterer. She would die of a heart attack, or he would get murdered, and that solves that. But it also, has some really crappy side effects. Like, none of this is the plan, right? But it also means that you can't really make a movie about, say, a woman who is the victim of domestic violence, who overcomes that domestic violence and leaves her husband and finds somebody else. Because back then it would normally still need a man in your life to get out of that situation. So it couldn't be like, oh, I found a man who treats me right, and now I'm going to go with him and divorce my husband.
Right.
That was an impossible story to tell in Hollywood.
Oh, because it didn't follow the code. And it's like, yeah, where are those films? Like, we want to hear, like, that message is good, and that message is, but like, because of the code, you can't.
Right. You could never normalize that idea of like, no, I got divorced for good reasons.
Right. Ooh. And then we got the stigma on divorce, and then I think.
Oh gosh, and I just thought of a couple more things about sexuality and censorship. Homosexuality didn't exist, right? So they called it sexual perversion, like to not show sexual perversion. And then so even though they weren't necessarily in the code writing that specific line to me about homosexuality, people picked it up and said, well, that means we can't have homosexuality. Like, not even as anti-homosexuality messages.
Right.
So, this is, again, sort of a thought experiment, but like, movies that show homosexuals being punished or being ostracized in obviously are bad, but like the alternate was that they didn't show any homosexuals. So if you were in the audience, you didn't even know that there was necessarily a homosexuality to feel bad about. You felt like, I'm the only one in the world, because they just present this lie, right? That everyone in Hollywood knew was a lie because they knew queer people.
Right.
Everyone in Hollywood worked with queer people. Everyone on Broadway worked with queer people, and they were making up these worlds that were completely devoid of queer people.
That were literally Hollywood. Dang.
Yeah, and then the last thing was interracial marriage was not allowed.
Right.
So even as the state started doing away with their rules against interracial marriage, the rules on the books were still that Hollywood was not in support, right, of interracial relationships. Yeah.
God. And I learned on this show a phrase that I had not heard before, just because I'm somewhat ignorant. But you had mentioned the phrase queer coding.
Oh yeah, coded cinema. Oh, so we did talk about this before. Sorry.
Yeah, we were talking about
Burke Dennings. I think that Burke is a coded queer character. That he looks a lot like talks a lot like a gay character would in later films. Yeah.
And you mentioned like Dr. Pretorius and Dr. Frankenstein in Bride of Frankenstein.
Yeah, in the sequel. Yeah, they're definitely gay. Once someone whispers like a college professor whispers in your ear to say like, hey, look at these guys, they're gay, and now you watch it. Oh God, of course, there's no way to unsee that. That of course that's what's going on there. But if you didn't know, if you weren't sure what to look at, you could watch that movie 3, 4, 5 times and not understand that they're a gay couple. Right. Even though we have scenes like Dr. Pretorius coming in and kicking Mrs. Frankenstein out while Dr. Frankenstein's in the bed and sitting and talking to him while he's in his pajamas, and then proposing that they get a business relationship going, and all sorts of quite gay stuff.
Interesting. I think my favorite is. And I only know about this because I think it was in an interview, or like one of the actors mentioned it, but the relationship of Captain Hook and Smee in Hook.
Yeah, that seems obvious now that you mention it, right?
Yeah. But it didn't to me. I was like, they're just really good, really quirky friends.
Yeah, and this is the ship's mate who has a bed in the captain's quarters.
Right. And then me, don't try to stop me. Don't try to stop me.
Oh, but you're talking about in Hook, the Spielberg version.
In Hook, yes.
But even in the Disney version, right? So then Captain Hook gets knocked overboard, and what does Shmi do? He throws himself overboard. Right. It's like, I can't live without you, Captain.
Oh. Oh boy, yeah. So
all Disney villains are queer. I just want to say that. I've made a case like that, and that's oversimplifying, but.
I mean, no, I've heard the same case. I've heard the same case posed, and now I'm looking back and I was like,
it's harder to name when that's Jafar. Not right. Yeah, Jafar, Ursula, Scar, Lady Tremaine, Maleficent, Captain Hook. Captain Hook. Those damn Siamese twin cats from Lady and the Tramp. What's his name? Aristocats. Edgar?
Edgar, yeah.
Edgar's gay, obviously.
Wow.
Madam Mim, Madam Medusa,
Mm-hmm.
Hades.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Oh my
Governor
God.
Ratcliffe and Professor
And
Radigan.
Radigan.
Yeah.
Radigan.
Yeah, they all are.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Gaston.
Gaston, yes. Of course, Gaston. So, hey, we don't have to worry because that's all going to work out. Wow. Look at how much you learn on the Exorcist Minute.
Oh, Frollo.
Of course, Frollo.
I was like, we're missing some other one from the 90s. Yeah,
Frollo. For all his gross creeping on Esmeralda.
Right, of course. Why is he doing all that? Right. Hellfire. Yeah.
Oh, God.
But yeah, you could name like one or two, like George C. Scott's character in The Rescuers Down Under. No.
Yeah.
Joanna the Lizard. Yeah.
Yes. As soon as he said, I was like, it was like George C. Scott. I was like, yeah, McLeach is not. It's like, oh, but Joanna, yeah.
Oh, and we didn't mention Cruella. I mean, Cruella is
Cruella de Vil, of course.
Shere Khan.
Wow, we're just going.
Because now I'm trying to name one that isn't, and I'm like, I keep failing. So I guess
that's hard.
Clayton from Tarzan, maybe.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, there we go, Clayton. But even what's his name? Oh yeah, you already said Radcliffe and his
dog
partner.
Percy
and his partner. Yeah. Wow. My mind is being opened. I'm seeing all the colors of the wind.
There's this book, The Celluloid Closet, which is by Vito Russo, who was the founder of GLAAD.
Okay.
Like that was working on depictions of queer people in media. And so he wrote a book that was the first to really like address this, of all these coded queer characters. And he was talking about like gay people off camera, and then later on, explicit queer movies that gay people were making, or even straight people were making. But he pointed out that his first, one of his earliest memories of coded queer characters was Honest John and Gideon in Pinocchio.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. That he was like, what's with these guys? What's their deal? And then he gets a little like, oh yeah, of course.
Oh, it's been so long since I've thought of Honest John and Gideon. Wow.
And I've seen the remake that Robert Zemeckis made, and it is Keegan-Michael Key playing Honest John, and they're not gay in that one.
Oh, okay. Wow. Well, I prefer the originals.
Me too.
Yeah. Keenan, is Disney like making some kind of statement about all of them being villains?
Oh goodness, Lester, this is too big of a question. Okay,
what have I opened? What have I done?
People can. So there is argument about that. I think that it was typical in a lot of more fantastical movies. Say, The Wicked Witch of the West is gay. So Disney was in that realm. Where we could be a little bit pushed. I don't believe that they were necessarily making a statement when they were doing it. It was just the kind of thing that could help stand in for queerness. And remember, they're taking a lot of existing materials and adapting them and condensing them and sort of emphasizing them. So, why is the Disney version of Lady Tremaine queer? Is that in the original Cinderella? Potentially, that might be there a little bit. And then when you condense it, and then movies tend to have an eye towards like, this shadow figure idea in the villains. Like the villains become, as you start working in movies, more exact opposites of the hero.
Yes.
So Dorothy Gale versus the Wicked Witch. Like Dorothy is innocent and pure and doesn't understand that she has magical powers, and the Wicked Witch is craven and she lives in the sky where Dorothy lives on the. Everything is opposite, right?
Right.
So if we have a Cinderella and she's pure and virginal and really just wants true love, then we have, what's her shadow? Oh, we have this woman who is this corrupt version of her, where she has been married but doesn't necessarily like men, and it prefers to sleep in her cat with her cat Lucifer in this big marriage bed that's empty, and want to ruin everybody else's marriage and see marriage only as this like commercial thing to get her daughters married off to, right? So it's all, I think it's a byproduct more than anything else of Disney trying to talk about the kind of heroes they like being pure and family oriented and Christian, and then they get these lonely, sad, and very fun characters.
Yeah, definitely.
That's the other thing.
Villains are my favorite.
Yeah, the best character in most of the Disney films in the classical era is the villain.
For sure.
Yeah, so it's this double-edged sword where, nowadays when people are looking back at this, I talk to a lot of queer youth, and they're like, oh, well, that kind of sucks. Disney was putting you out and making fun of your identity. But I'm still old enough that I don't quite feel as hurt by that. I'm like, but yeah, they're the best ones.
Yeah,
I'd much rather be Jafar and Iago than
of course.
Jasmine.
Yeah. No, they are the first things that I think of. They are the first songs that I listen to. If I was like, hey, let's listen to Lion King soundtrack. Oh, I'm gonna listen to Be Prepared. I'm like, that's yeah. So they weren't actively trying to say anything negative.
I don't believe so, and I haven't seen anything in the literature or the history where they sat down and said that.
Okay. Right. But also they weren't like, hey, let's get some representation in here.
No,
like you were saying, it's okay. So that wasn't conscious either.
No, that was certainly not conscious to get them represent. Most of them probably didn't understand that they were, the Disney studio was particularly conservative. Mm-hmm. And by that, I don't mean like a political agenda where they were trying to criticize people, but they did not have actors and artists besides the animators on staff who were like in the queer scene. They had a lot of actors who would put on queer character voices, like Sterling Holloway, who was the voice of Cheshire Cat and Winnie the Pooh
and Kaa the Python.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
and yeah, he was the first Pooh before Jim Cummings. Yeah,
right. Yeah, and that voice is like a gay stock character, but he was straight in his real life. They were a pretty conservative group up there, a little bit different, a little bit distant from the rest of Hollywood.
Interesting. Wow. So much. Oh my gosh. I'm loving learning about all this stuff too.
Well, you can distract me anytime by talking about Disney, because that's my favorite class to teach, is the history of Walt Disney the man. That's my favorite. So he's a very complicated person, which is fun for doing history on.
Right. Well, you have put forth the invite, Keenan, so just be prepared. But back to what were we talking? Oh, yeah,
I don't know.
Sexual desecration. Yeah. Jesus. But yeah, like talking about censorship and everything like that. And I'm just going off. I remember like early video games like Nintendo and stuff like that, where they would erase the crosses and they would erase anything that was like remotely sexual. And a lot of the video games were coming out of Japan at those times. And there was, you'll see if anybody knows, anime and manga and stuff like that, it's, they're a little bit more liberal with their sexual expression in those, let's say.
Yes. With all sorts of cultural repercussions that have to do with the way they censor films over there.
Precisely. And so like when something like a video game gets ported over here, they will like draw on a swimsuit on somebody or something like that. Or they'll erase like the crosses on the top of gravestones. Because that means something to us, even though like over there, like it's just like, oh yeah, that's a cross on a gravestone, so whatever. Has no like religious significance. It's just like a Hollywood like stereotypical gravestone,
Right. In Japan, I'm not sure. I mean, in Europe for sure, it's definitely much more buttoned down.
Right, in Europe, and like, or they'll like change the color of the blood, like so they'll make it like, oh, it's monsters, so it'll be like green blood or something like that.
I don't mean to start a debate with people who are Marvel fans. I like to do that to my students because I have a podium and they don't, and I know they like the Marvel movies, and I can say this, but I was pretty shocked at the controversy about the latest Doctor Strange that was directed by Sam Raimi, which parents were complaining and saying like, I took my kid to this Marvel movie and it had the same rating, it had a PG-13 as all the other Marvel movies, and this is not appropriate for children, and it totally isn't. That movie probably should have had a rated R, but yeah, talking about like the change of blood color, that's one of the ways that they get around that, is that the villain, there might be people still are looking for spoilers, so the villain,
okay, spoiler wall, guys.
Yeah, sorry. The villain in the movie kills robots, and so she's got, they're covered in oil. And the robot, I mean, you've seen them murder a bunch of people, and the oil is meant to suggest blood, but they get around it by that. So in her big climactic moment, she's covered in oil when it's meant to represent blood.
It's supposed to be blood, right?
Yeah, so that's one of the things they try to get around that, but I try to. You haven't seen this movie, huh?
No, I haven't.
The villain makes somebody's brain explode through their skull.
Oh.
And you see it on camera in a close-up of this person whose brain is exploding out of them. You see their skull break and out the back of their head, but it's retained through their skin and their superhero costume. It's pretty nasty stuff, and I think it absolutely should have gotten an R rating. Or, at least it points to the trouble that we have where our gap is between PG-13 and we've just trained audiences to mean that means children can go in instead of it's really only appropriate for 13-year-olds. So there's it points out a flaw in the rating system as we have it. Yeah.
Interesting.
There are okay, so let me try to get this in like 10 seconds so people can skip through it. But so she makes a guy's head they make
hang on. Okay, so hang on. Okay, so we're putting up the spoiler wall now.
Great. So the villain makes somebody's head explode out through their skull, and it only is retained. You don't see the brain go out because it is covered with a superhero suit, basically. The villain appears in someone's dream and snaps their neck, and that kills them in real life. One of the characters is killed at the beginning and then turns into a zombie, and we see their cheek fall off. We have mothers trying to kill their children.
Oh my goodness.
There's a whole bunch of stuff in it that should be, I think, R-rated, but people seem to disagree. Marvel fans disagree. Spoiler wall down.
Okay, spoiler wall down.
Thank you.
Wow. That was a whole lot of stuff that you just talked about that some people didn't hear. Wow.
Yeah, but I think it really speaks to this problem we have with the rating system, that it's not quite functional, where parents are thinking, oh, it's a PG-13 movie, and that means anybody can go, and we've trained them that way. It's not them misunderstanding the rating system; it's them seeing no difference in the rating system between, like no difference between, say, an action movie where they say ass a couple of times versus the Multiverse of Madness movie.
And I remember, so now I'm thinking of like Poltergeist, or like wasn't that like just straight up PG?
Yeah, there was not a PG-13 rating until 1984. Yeah, and that is specifically, people point to Spielberg's. Let me think of the movie.
Was it Poltergeist?
Well, Poltergeist would have been a little before that, but people tend to point towards the second Indiana Jones movie, the Temple of Doom, where he pulls a man's heart out of his chest, and we see it beating. Yeah, and then
we're not doing a spoiler wall for that one.
Not for that one. And then Gremlins, the first Gremlins, which is not quite PG and not quite R, so we needed something in between it. So they usually point towards Gremlins, and the first PG-13 rated movie is Red Dawn, the action movie for kids, the teenage action movie.
Interesting. So, Keenan, is the red in Red Dawn, is it blood?
The red in Red Dawn is communism.
Oh, okay. That's even worse.
Even worse. That's the Ruskies going and invading a town in Alaska.
Wow.
And they the only people who are free to fight it are the teens. So the teens go have their action movie.
This sounds like a movie I want to see.
Yeah, sure. It's a lot of fun.
Okay. All right. Oh my God. Wow. Okay. One more thing, and then let's get out of here as fast as we can. This desecration scene. I don't know how obvious it is from the quick glimpse that we get, but the stuff that's hanging off of this statue is meant to be sculpting clay and paint. Now, who do we know who has access to sculpting clay and paint? Just something to keep in the back of our mind as we go forward.
That is great. I mean, I hadn't thought of that before. And then, when you look at a still frame of it, I guess I'd always thought that it was something magical that had happened.
See, yeah, like I don't know if I necessarily like the idea of Reagan running around and doing this stuff. Like when I first saw this, like you, Keenan, I thought it just happened, like almost magically, because the demon was in the vicinity, like the clock or the noises in the attic. I'd rather it be supernatural and not like Pazuzu creeping around with cans of paint and sculpting clay. like there's a version of this, Keenan. There is a version of this, the version that no one will ever see, with Reagan dressed up Mission Impossible style, and she's breaking into the church, coming down on one of those wires, and she's doing like a bunch of unnecessary backflips, and then like painting the statue, and then like throwing a smoke bomb and disappearing into the night. Like I would much prefer it because we're so close geographically to the demon, that like everything around him within his sphere of influence is changing and being affected. Like the dogs when Father Marin is looking at the statue, right? He's bringing the evil with him, but he's not like creeping around with paint and a brush.
I think it hadn't occurred to me to be clay. In the script, it says it's painted and that it's sculpted clay, and it certainly looks like the clay. Now that you mention it, and you can pause it and look, it looks like the clay that she builds the dumb bird with.
Yes.
It has sort of that claymation quality where you see handprints in it. To the clay. It is not as fully formed like magic as you would expect. So I'm with you, and that's what I would like it to be, that it's magic. But I think the evidence is totally there that this is clay. This is made by someone externally and not projected through the statue internally through magic means.
Yeah. And in the book, it is even more obvious. Like Blatty goes to lengths to, like, we're going to meet a new character who, he's on the case. He's looking at all these desecrations, and he's slowly kind of like putting two and two together about what's going on in the McNeil house. And he notes, like specifically in the book, he's like, hey, the clay from the statue is the same as the clay from the McNeil house.
Oh, jeez. All right. Well,
so it's like it's stated outright, which I don't know if I like. I don't like the idea of our omnipotent demon creeping around like a Scooby-Doo character.
Well, Detective Kinderman has proven you wrong. He's made the connection.
He's going to unmask this demon. He's like, let's see who this really is. Eileen Dietz, it's you. Oh, speaking of, all right. Okay, so that's just the first 10 seconds of this minute, folks. Jesus, we've been recording for how long? Oh, God, it's an hour. Jesus. I'll cut this down. Okay. Okay, so that's the first 10 seconds. So we go from there, from this horrible scene to a cute giraffe. Such a pleasant image, thank God. And I'm watching this closely now, and I feel really dumb because, we're at a hospital. And Chris is doing needlepoint. Right? It's like Chris is outside doing needlepoint, and somewhere inside the doctors are doing needlepoint, but of a different kind. But something else I caught, because we're watching this closely, she just started this needlepoint project. She's doing the leaves, and now the rest of that image is drawn on, and she's going over it with the thread. And now I'm thinking, is this Reagan's drawing?
Aww.
Like, what a fun little detail, right? Like, Reagan draws the picture of this giraffe on the cloth, and now Mom is going over it with the needlepoint. And again, just this little visual hint that mom and daughter are close. They're stitched together at the beginning of this thing, right?
Oh, that's really cute.
Yeah. So we then cut from here to the most 70s doctor's waiting room we have ever seen, complete with orange and leather couches, two kids fighting in the lower left of the screen. So much orange in this shot, orange and brown. And now I'm curious, when did we decide, like as a society, to make hospitals like clean and white and sanitized with like calming blues and greens? Like that's a choice that we do now, right? Like, we want you to feel calm here, so blue and soft green, and we also want you to see how clean everything is, so all the walls and the surfaces are now white with those like calming accents of blue and green, so we feel safe and relaxed. And this is like the opposite of that. This is like orange, and the chairs are this very gross, poopy color.
I've seen people like point out finally after decades of pretending that the 80s was all like neon pink and neon green. Like, oh, let's throw an 80s party and everyone's wearing bright Saved by the Bell type colors.
Right.
It's like, well, if you were there, you remember everything was brown. There were ashtrays everywhere, and everything had a little stain of dirt on them, of ash. Yep. McDonald's was brown and orange. The bowling alley was brown and orange, and there was cigarette smoke everywhere.
Yeah, we had so much brown and orange. Like the 80s and the 70s, just smeared with a lens of film of just like cigarette smoke.
You must remember houses where there was orange carpet and brown wood paneling.
I lived in
Yes, exactly. Okay, so I'm not the only one.
Yeah.
Yeah, the depictions, like everything looked like a Madonna video, is absolutely not true.
Mm-hmm,
Everything was the leftover 1970s. So it was like this shot in The Exorcist, but old.
Yes. with this orange and brown and these like dirty, gross green, like the pea soup that we're going to see in a little bit later was brighter and more vibrant than the green that the 1970s had.
There's a lot of frosted glass that just had like it had texture to it, which looked nice at first, but it just meant that it had dust covering it all the time.
Yeah. Oh, I remember going to my grandma's house and like, we had like a whole, like a mirror, with that kind of like, there was like a design painted on the glass.
Like, that probably looked nice when you bought it.
Yeah. Well, I have very fond memories of my grandparents' house. But,
I'm sure. Yeah. But I mean, it's like, you buy these things, you don't realize that, in 10 years, it's going to be uncleanable.
Right. Like waterbeds. What the fuck were we thinking?
Yeah, I had a waterbed growing up. That's what I slept on.
Yeah. Same thing. Our whole house, like we moved into this house and the master bedroom had a waterbed and the kids' room had a waterbed. And we were like, this is a smart idea. We are brilliant human beings. Ugh, oh my God.
Well, so this is gross, but this is how it looked back then in the 70s. This is a brand new doctor's waiting room.
Yeah, so this isn't Friedkin like making a funny commentary on like a look at how unsanitary this doctor. No, this is a normal doctor's office.
This is very accurate.
Yeah. Chris is wearing red with these big, massive black sunglasses on. These are huge, and I like the use of these sunglasses. Where it's like, oh, she's a movie star, so she's going to be wearing these sunglasses. But also, like, there's going to be a moment later on in the film where she takes them off, and you see.
Yeah, that's a stunning moment. Yeah, stunning.
Yeah. So not just to hide her identity, but like also like some other things too. Now. We get a close up of her. We don't get a close up of her here. It's a wide shot, and we cut from that shot to a literal shot of Reagan's arm, and Keenan, the goddamn needle, actually goes into the arm.
Yeah,
and folks, we're going to see in a bit here. Even more gruesome medical stuff. And there's lots of trivia I want to talk about when we do. But this is the beginning of that stuff. And actually, apparently, anecdotally, more than the pea soup, more than the demon stuff, this is what affected people, all this medical stuff. But yeah, we'll get there.
Yeah. The later medical stuff, like it's triggering in these different ways, right? The later medical stuff that you're talking about really made people throw up in the theaters. We have a lot of anecdotal evidence of that. I was trying to read about needle phobia, and the stat that I read was that it is about 10% of people report needle phobia to their medical doctors. But we don't really know, because there are certainly some large number of people who do not go to the doctor because of needle phobia.
Right. So they wouldn't be in those numbers.
Right. So we don't really know. So at least 10% of people admit to their doctors that they have needle phobia. So at least 10% of people watching it at home would be like, oh, this is the scariest scene in The Exorcist, is seeing this actual needle going into an actual arm.
Yeah. And like, I don't think we have any way of knowing for sure whether this is Linda Blair's arm. I almost think it is. If it's a double, the double is also a child. Like, this is a child's arm. There's no way that arm belongs to an adult. It's real. It's not a dummy arm. We were just talking about like the uncanny valley and all that stuff. Like, there's no way that you can make an arm in that time, 1973, look that realistic. And Keenan, that nurse is not wearing gloves.
I think that's typical.
Okay. All right. Well, like, I noticed that too. I was like, wait a minute. Also, real nurse, actor? We don't know.
This one I couldn't find out.
Yeah, she's uncredited. I can't find anything on any of the the places I go for research. Do
you know later on the medical technician? Do you know about them?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Just checking. All right. Yeah, this one I could not find out.
Yeah. Oh, that one. Well, that one is a we'll talk about that one. Whew.
But yeah,
everybody listening is like, what?
I think this is probably a real nurse, though. I think so, because of the amount of detail there, and then just knowing, how many times we've pulled a non-professional in this movie to do this.
There's so many like actual like people in this.
Yeah.
That sounds stupid. There are so many actual people in this thing.
I think she's a real nurse, but I couldn't find that for sure.
Yeah. In the next shot, we see that she has a coffee filter on her head. I'm being stupid. I know I know it's a hat, but I'm kind of curious, like, what is the purpose of this hat? It can't be a sanitary thing, like to keep the hair contained, because it's literally like resting on the top of her head, and the hair is just like spilling out all around. It must be like a thing to denote station, like maybe she's an RN or something.
Yeah, my understanding is that nun hats is where this comes from, because the first nurses.
Well, no, clearly. Keenan, there's clearly a hat on her head. Okay, I'm going to stop. Wow, Lester thought he was Abbott and Costello for just a second.
Nun sauce left beef is what they say. Yeah, so no, that nuns habits, because the first nurses were nuns, and you're talking about like the design of hospitals. The first hospitals were abbots or abbeys, right? So yeah, my understanding is that the habit, the nurse's habit, evolved into the nun's hat, and so it wasn't necessarily about sanitation, because they didn't have germ theory when the nurse's hat was invented. So
that was before that.
Yeah. So someone could double check me. That's probably a vast oversimplification about the nun hat. I'm sorry, the nurse's hat. But nowadays nurses don't wear hats. They don't wear hairnets. That's just not something that they need to worry about sanitation. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, so the nurse has got her lying down on this examination bed, and we see from the nameplate on this thing that this is the Series 2000 automatic electrocardiograph. And of course, everyone in the audience knows what that does. They're like, oh, the Series 2000 automatic electrocardiograph.
Much better than the Series 1000 automatic electrocardiograph.
Yeah, at least twice as good. But no, I'm guessing the audience didn't know, or I mean, I don't know, like we say cardio and we know that relates to the heart. I don't know. I don't know how smart 70s audiences were.
This is an EKG machine, I believe.
Yes, right. It measures heart activity, and maybe that's okay that we don't have to know exactly what it does. Maybe that was the intent. Maybe we don't need to know what this is. We just know that it looks scary. It's invasive. It's uncomfortable. She's got all these things, these red knobs sticking out of her chest, and the machine is like clicking and whirring and making mechanical noises. And so, Keenan, like, I'm here on my laptop and I'm pausing and I'm rewinding like you do for these podcasts. And I wanted to pause on Reagan's face here because I think Linda Blair is doing this really good job, and I can't decide if it's Reagan looking out of those eyes, like looking hopeless and afraid, or if maybe we're looking at the demon and he's watching all this, like he's reveling in all this trouble that he's caused and looking at what Reagan has to go through. So I tried to pause it in time to get her face. And I did get a face, but not hers. Keenan, what the Kentucky Fried Extra Crispy Christmas am I looking at here?
Well, that's our old buddy Captain Howdy. We've been waiting for.
We have been waiting for this moment. So yeah, folks, this is Eileen Dietz as the face of our beloved Captain Howdy. He's finally here.
Everyone's best friend.
Everyone's best friend. He's finally here. We get to see him in the flesh, as it were. Now, Keenan, this isn't the more famous shot that I remember, the one that we're going to see later. Like if you Google images of Captain Howdy, you're not going to see this shot first. You're going to see another one that's been, I think, just like reproduced like so many times in other art forms.
I forgot this one happened, so this really did scare me. I forgot this one was here.
And like, so is this one of the? Because you were talking about like in other versions, some of the faces don't pop up, and I assume you were talking about like the Captain Howdy face. Is this one not in the original?
Oh, well, actually, this entire sequence of going to the doctor is not in the original.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, so this is all versions we've never seen before.
I see. So this the whole hospital thing.
The whole hospital thing. I had to double check it. So I double checked this, specifically for this, because I thought that was the case. And I went and found a website, thecriticaleye.me, and there was a review of this that confirmed this for me by an author called The Thorn. I don't know. That's probably not his real name. And yeah, he confirmed that to me. And then he linked me to a really great breakdown of every single shot that's added to, pretty much like every single sequence that's added to the version you'd never seen before. And that's at movie-censorship.com.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah, I triple checked this. I was like, am I misremembering this? Because this seems really good. This whole hospital sequence is really, really good.
Yes.
Yeah, so they break it down there that at minute 32, this whole office scene is new. So it's an extra 254 seconds of movie that we did not get in 1973.
I see. So when you say minute 32, like, so are we talking about like from the moment we see that cute giraffe face?
Yes, I believe so. So they don't have it beyond minute 32. They don't say the to the second there, but yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Okay. So the other thing was in the original for sure, the desecration scene.
Right. Yes, I remember that very, very vividly.
Yeah. So this is all new with Dr. Klein's office. This is all all old being put back in.
Right. Interesting. So I just want to say I really like the Captain Howdy face. It's one of my favorite things in the movie, and I think you do too, Keenan. Yeah.
My favorite character.
Yeah. And I have some stuff I want to share about it, about like the design and all of that stuff. But I want to save that for that next shot, the famous one that where he's sort of like looking down with the wall eyes and everything like that. So for now, let's talk a little bit about Eileen Dietz, because that's who this is, folks. This is Linda Blair's, I guess, body double, Keenan, stunt double.
Both of those things, yeah.
Yeah. And also the famous face of Captain Howdy. And she was cast because she's about the same size as Linda. She's very petite, but she's older. She's an adult. I think she's about 25, 26 years old here. And I had plans to go into her whole thing right here, just to get all the deets on deets. Boy, I am just in a punning mood today.
You're on it today.
I'm on it, yeah. I'm on fire. No. But now I'm wondering, because hers is a sort of special case, right? Like Captain Howdy himself, she sort of pops in and out of the film, She's Reagan's double for some of the more physical scenes, and some of the most iconic scenes. And of course, she does the Captain Howdy face. And I'm wondering now if we should sort of like tell her story as the movie unfolds, and maybe just give a little primer here. What do you think?
Yeah, a little primer here is nice because this is the introduction of a major character, I suppose, but we're going to see more of her. And then it is one of the quirks of this movie. Some people say the crimes of William Friedkin, that Eileen Dietz is uncredited for either her role as Captain Howdy or as the body double of, or even stunt double. That's something that would be credited for sure today.
Yeah. So let's get into just a little bit about Eileen Dietz. Now, as a child, she was doing commercials with her twin sister, Marianne Dietz. Later, Marianne DeFosse. Eileen studied acting at the neighborhood playhouse. She had some small guest roles and some recurring roles on television. And her film debut was in the 1966 movie Teenage Gang Debs as Ellie. Then the year after, she played Penny Wall in David Holzman's Diary.
That's a major film. That's a big deal for a certain subset of filmmakers. So David Holzman's Diary is this kind of experimental film. When they're showing it, they're kind of being a little cagey about whether it's fiction or whether it's documentary, because it's in the style of somebody going around with his camera making his own little video diary. So Eileen Dietz is a character in there who is like the love interest, or that's not quite saying it right, but David Holtzman is obsessed with Eileen Dietz's character and appears to be stalking her, kind of. And so the question is like, oh gosh, did I just see this? Did I really just see this guy break into this woman's house and film her naked on her bed without her knowing?
Oh my goodness!
It is fiction, so we do know that, but that's a majorly influential movie for a lot of the filmmakers of Friedkin's era.
I see. Huh. And now Eileen, she spent most of the late 60s and early 70s doing theater, most notably in the premiere of Joyce Carol Oates' Ontological Proof of My Existence. Her portrayal in this play led to an invitation to do a screen test for The Exorcist. So that's how she got into this movie. And now, this is where it gets a little hairy, folks. Fans of The Exorcist already know what I'm talking about. I guess we're finally getting into some of the drama that went on behind the camera. But the story of Eileen Dietz and her role in this film is a whole thing in and of itself. We have claims about who did what. I'm talking about Eileen Dietz versus Linda Blair. How much of the performance or the portrayal of this character can be accredited to Linda Blair to Eileen Dietz, and of course later to Mercedes McCambridge. This is maybe one of the biggest bits of drama within the lore of the making of this movie. I believe they called it the Great Pea Soup Scandal or the Great
Right.
Pea Soup War. And it's a lot to unpack. So for now, let's just say it has to do with how much screen time Eileen Dietz had and whether or not she was properly credited. There's anecdotal stories about how she's the one claiming how much stuff she did in the film. And then there's also stuff about how Friedkin didn't even credit her at all. I'm going to lean on Friedkin here and say that I'm going to put the blame on him. But it's a huge, big pea soupy mess, and I'm so excited because we on this show, and by the very nature of this show, have an opportunity which I don't think we've ever had to examine this movie literally minute by minute and to catch just who is doing what. And I'm excited about that. That's going to be fun. And I think as the film unfolds, the story of this story will unfold along with it. And we'll hear more about Dietz and Blair and even more drama as we go.
Yeah. So that'll be coming down the pike a little bit.
Yeah.
For now, we just have this almost burned subconsciously into our heads, right? This face staring at us saying, howdy.
Oh my gosh, yeah. But yeah, for now though, let's join Reagan back in the office of Dr. Klein, played by Barton Heyman, a successful character actor with a pretty long career. But I think this might be his most famous role here, playing Dr. Klein. And we'll have more to say about Barton Heyman and Dr. Klein in later minutes. But for right now, we see that he is trying to test Reagan's reflexes and is concerned. Why is he concerned? From this minute, it looks as if Reagan is not responding to the testing. What's going on? I think we'll have to wait until the next minute. That's all the notes I have for this minute. Keenan, do we have anything else that we want to add?
No, I think we got it.
I think we got it, and we got a whole lot more. This may be our longest episode, actually.
But, we end right, again, like our previous minute, we end right before a pretty shocking moment, like seconds before something pretty shocking.
So yeah, that's our clickbaity moment of the episode, folks. You'll just have to wait. You'll just have to listen to the next episode.
You won't believe what Reagan says to answer that question.
Right. Doctors hate her. Oh, God. And priests, apparently. No. But okay, yeah, folks, once again, this has been another excellent Exorcist Minute. My name is Lester Ryan Clark. You can find me on all the socials as Lester Ryan Clark.
And I'm Keenan Dietz. You can find me on Instagram and Letterboxd as Howdy Keenan.
And yeah, the website for our show is theexorcistminute.com. Very simple. And yes, folks, we now have a listener group for the show as well on Facebook. It's called Compelling Conversations, an Exorcist Minute listener group. It's a private group, but just request to join and we'll let you in. And then you can be in here with us. I don't know how many more times I'm going to do that, Joe. But yeah, you can talk about the movie, interact with us and fellow fans, and you can post questions, polls, memes, Captain Howdy cereal box art,
Captain Howdy needlepoint.
Let's do that. Right? Who's like there's a market, there's a corner of the market that we haven't done. Yeah. And of course, as always, if you'd like to leave us a message, our email is theexorcistminute@gmail.com, all one word, and we'll be sure to read it. Lastly, if you like the show and you want to help us out, the best thing that you can do for a new podcast that's just starting out is to leave a 5-star review. And that'll help other people find us and we can keep growing this really cool community. All right, Keenan, that was a mouthful. Are you thinking what I'm thinking?
I think I am, Lester.
Folks, until next time, the power of the Series 2000 automatic electrocardiograph compels you. Much better than the Series 1000.
I wouldn't be caught dead with the Series 1000.
I think that was why they changed it. Too many people were being caught dead. It was like, we got to up this like 1,000 more.